Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Welcome aboard a Captain's Mindset podcast, where we believe that everyone has the potential to become the captain of their own life. I'm your host, Kyle Freiberger, and after spending the majority of my life in the pursuit of becoming an airline captain, I realized that true happiness and satisfaction came from something much deeper than career success. At the age of 34, I took a leap of faith, left my perfect job to become an entrepreneur. This podcast is my way of helping people who feel stuck in life, or even those who have achieved success but still feel unfulfilled. Together, we'll explore how to become the captain of your own life and a better leader for the people around you. I'm not perfect and I don't pretend to be. That's why this podcast is filled not only with my life lessons, but also with insights from other successful leaders in business and in everyday life. My goal is to help you unlock your potential and create a positive impact on the world around you. So buckle up and get ready to take control of your life. If you find value in this podcast, please subscribe and share it with other like-minded individuals. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you enjoy this episode of a Captain's Mindset podcast. All right, welcome back to another episode. We've got Matt Easton. Matt's the owner of Easton University, a sales coach, and a successful leader in his industry. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Kyle. It's an honor and a privilege, and excited to get started.
Well, I appreciate that. I came across some of your content on Instagram and LinkedIn, and you're all over the place now.
Perfect.
Working your way up, so you're doing something right.
Thank you.
But I absolutely love your message, and we were talking a little bit before we started here that this podcast, we want to keep reiterating the message of leadership is all about leading yourself first and leading from the inside out. So, right jumping off the bat here, what's your idea of leadership when it comes to, kind of that definition, like in sales specifically as well?
Yeah, I mean, and that definition for me really hits home, Kyle, because I was in a situation as a young kid where the expectations weren't there, the options weren't there. I was about as destitute as you could as a kid, and really had to lead from the inside in not only developing myself, but then the skill sets to create a number of businesses. I started my first business as a teenager, and then through there. But really, for me, it was my story, my life story really is that the definitive, hey, you got to lead from within. So that's what really attracts me to the podcast. And that's why I'm a fan is, it starts with yourself for sure.
Yeah. We can't echo that message enough, I don't think. And that's kind of the fun part about this podcast is that, to be honest, my prerequisite for people coming on here is they iterate that message, or they amplify that message or echo that message. So where would you start? Where would you start when it comes to leading yourself? And I don't know if you want to talk about a little bit more about your backstory.
Sure.
To figure out how you got to where you are. How do you lead yourself?
So I'll share that backstory with you. I was a kid. I had a single mom at the time. My father turned out to be, father was my stepfather, but there was a number of years where it was just my mom, my brother, and I. So I had a single mom raising two boys in the great city of Boulder, Colorado, making $4,000 a year. And I'm not making that number up. Yeah, this was the late 70s, early 80s, $4,000 a year. She worked part-time at a church. So things that doesn't stretch very far, even in 1980s dollars. And I was in the middle of kind of being diagnosed with some dyslexia. It was actually some neurological dysfunction in my eyes, but point blank, I couldn't read very well. I was about 8 years old. School was not my jam at the time. And I remember one summer sitting outside playing in the mud, and I have it here with me at this desk. I was playing with this exact toy. I've kept it with me my whole life. It's a 1979 Matchbox, shout out to them, Porsche Turbo. I was playing with this in the mud unsupervised because that's what we did in 1980 when your mom makes $4,000 and works a bunch of hours. And I hear this noise, and I looked up from playing with my toy, and lo and behold, call it God, the universe, the force, whatever. This exact car came driving down my street, same color, Kelly green. So I did what any unsupervised, dyslexic, broke kid that had a few toys would do. Same thing you would do, Kyle. I chased after it. And I figured I knew where it was going, because there was one person with some sort of semblance of wealth within the general running distance vicinity of where I lived. A guy named Mr. Carroll was an attorney. And I said, I bet Mr. Carroll got a Porsche. And lo and behold, there it was parked outside of his house. So I waited for about 3 hours because, again, unsupervised, had nothing better to do. Well, it's probably less than that. Let's call it 2 hours. It was a considerable amount of time. I waited for Mr. Carroll to come out of the house to his Porsche so I could see it. And he didn't come out. Some guy in a suit came out. And I said, Mister, is that your car? He said, yeah, it is. You want to check it out? And he let me sit in it. And I was like, wow, what do you do? Are you a lawyer? He's like, no. I said, are you a doctor? Because as a broke kid, that's all you ever hear is you got to be a lawyer or you got to be a doctor. He's like, no. And he said, I work in sales. And I was like, huh? And I remember I kind of vaguely thinking, shows like Miami Vice and stuff around the time. I'm like, maybe he's a drug dealer. So
it's a
right,
assumption.
Right. And maybe it's Crockett and Tubbs. I don't know. I don't know if Crockett and Tubbs were on TV yet, but I did consider the fact that he might be a drug dealer, but he was dressed pretty nice. But he's like, I work for a company called Texas Instruments and I sell computers. And I said to him, wow, this must be the best computers in the world. And life comes down to a few moments, Kyle. And the Porsche being the exact color, Kelly green 79 turbo. And then the guy swore, he used bad language with me. And I'll use the word he said on the podcast here. You can beep it out if you feel necessary. But back then, people usually didn't use foul language with an 8-year-old. He goes, no. I said, man, that must be the best computer in the world. He goes, no, frankly, it's a piece of shit, kid. And I was like, oh. And then I felt kind of bad. Like, did he just sell Mr. Carroll a bad computer? And he said, here's the thing. The company can't sell them. He said, I'm the only person in the country that can sell them. I get $200 commission every time I sell them, which is probably about $800,000 in today's money. And I realized the computer's not great, but it does a few things really well. One of the things is you can do what's called calendar entries with it. In the software in the computer, you can go in and have a calendar and you can put stuff in there. He says, you know what Mr. Carroll does for a living? I said, yeah, he's a lawyer. He goes, well, do you know anything about him personally? And I said, you mean the twitching? And he goes, yeah, he's got a thing. Yeah, it's Parkinson's. All the kids in the neighborhood knew Mr. Carroll had Parkinson's. And he said, Mr. Carroll, John, he has Parkinson's and he has to take medication at 3 p.m. every day. And with his law practice way down in Westminster, he has a choice. He can take his medication and get somebody to drive him home because he's not allowed to drive after he takes his medication. Or he can leave work early. But the problem is when he has meetings at work, he writes down all the stuff from when he talks with clients. He has to get those entered so his bookkeeper can invoice them. This computer is perfect for him. And he said, the secret in life, kid, is whether you got a bad situation, a bad computer, a great situation, a great computer, figure out how you can help other people. Figure out the skills, what you have, the things that you have, and figure out, how you can take somebody's current situation and help them get to where they want to be. And he goes, you'll do just fine in life. You can have all the Porsches you want in the world. And I said to him, man, that sounds great. I'd probably be okay with that, but I can't read. And he's like, don't ever talk bad about yourself ever again. And he goes into the front of this sucker because the engine's in the back, and he pops the hood and he pulls out, and I don't want to ask you how old you are. Maybe you're too young. You don't know about these, but he pulled out the dope toy in 80, a Speak and Spell. And he was manufactured by Texas Instruments, the company he was selling computers for. And he handed it to me. And that thing was like $79 back then. There was no way in hell I was ever getting a Speak and Spell. And I really pushed my luck. I didn't realize I was pushing my luck, but I looked at it, I was like, man, this is sweet. But my older brother, Andrew, is going to just beat the crap out of me and take it. And the guy goes back into the front and he pulls out another one.
Holy.
Yeah. And he goes, give this to your brother. He goes, just learn how to spell just vaguely and just start listening to people. He's like, kid, just go around, ask people that are successful, ask them questions, figure out how they do things. He goes, you're going to be way better off than I ever was. And I left that at 8 years old going, okay, wait a minute. life's not that complicated. And props to my mom. My mom was great and everything, but my mom was born and raised in South Boston. She was broke. She didn't have a lot of insights. I would get on the bus for like 15, 20 cents. I'd go down to Boulder and I'd just start going to office buildings and companies and being like, hey, do you guys need any help? And they're like, beat it, kid. And I would hang around the parking lot, pick up trash. And I started just hanging out with people that were successful, people that were leaders of companies, all the big companies out of Boulder. I would hang around there. And I started to learn, Kyle, that these great leaders, these great entrepreneurs, they all did things really, really similarly. And it wasn't the kind of things that anybody was talking at in school. And it wasn't the kind of things like, hey, there was nothing around, you gotta motivate people and you gotta crack. It was none of that. It was all just very specific process driven stuff. So I started to figure that out, and I just started to manage my personal relationships and my business with those same process driven stuff. And most of that is, honest to goodness, I would say probably 35 to 40% of the stuff inside eastonuniversity.com, our training, is stuff I learned at like between the ages of maybe 10 and 16 years old. And it still holds true today. And unfortunately today, we've even gone further away from those skills have actually gotten worse, right? Like, you're a pilot, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll use the pilot example for why leadership is so screwed up today in business. So let's say I'm in a yellow super decathlon, just got out of the aerobatics box. I can't fly, by the way, at a pilot's level. But one of my mentors did have a super decathlon. We had to wear the parachutes, right?
Yeah.
And do the loops and everything. But let's say I'm coming into land, okay? And there's a 20-mile-an-hour crosswind. Can I land the plane, Kyle? Yes or no, as a pilot? Give me your professional recommendation. In a 20-mile-an-hour crosswind, can that plane be landed?
Probably not.
Really?
I don't know.
Okay. I don't know. I just picked 20 miles an hour. Let's say it's a 2-mile-an-hour crosswind. There's a crosswind going left to right. Can I land the plane?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. How? How do I land the plane with the crosswind going left to right, 2 miles an hour?
You correct for it.
Okay. How do I correct for it?
You have to put the inputs in.
Yeah. You can explain that as a pilot, right? Yet here's the inputs. You got left to right, dude, adjust here, your whatever, flap aileron, bump, you're good to go.
Well, that's why I didn't start explaining it, because it would take me probably 5 minutes. But yeah. Absolutely.
But in 5 minutes, you could explain me how to do that, correct?
Right.
Yeah. And this is where it's like our process has gone. We're all flying around these airplanes in our career, and nobody is like, okay, if this, then that, here's how you do this, right? Like I coach people who are like, I don't need any sales coaching. My company does great. And I'm like, okay, great. How do you close a deal? Close them all the time. Super easy. Okay, well, what are the words that you say? Like, what are the inputs that you say to close a deal? Well, it depends. No, it doesn't. Like, there's certain inputs, just like if people, a friend of mine played football in the NFL for 18 years, quarterback, best quarterback ever, right? There's another guy, Brady, that's maybe they say he's better, but my guy's pretty good. But no matter where you are, if you're in professional sports, right, you have a process. You trust your process. You follow your process, right? Yet in leadership and business, we're just kind of winging everything at the seat of our pants, and nobody's going, okay, if you're going to close a deal, right? If you want a contract signed, ask Kyle, hey, Kyle, does it make sense to sign the contract? Because if Kyle says no, to does it make sense, you've asked Kyle a timing question, and Kyle cannot reject you on doing the thing you want him to do, sign the contract, if you ask him a timing question. Hey, Kyle, does it make sense to sign the contract? Yes, it does. Congratulations. You made a great decision. I'll get it all over to you. We'll have it here 1:30 this afternoon. Fair enough? Yeah, great. Hey, Kyle, does it make sense to sign the contract? No. Got it. What's a good next step then? Right? Mm-hmm. I don't know. It makes sense. What's a good next step for me? Right? Like, there's certain processes, whether you're in, and this is taking it away from sales, because I know I'm the sales guy, but in business, like if you're going to lead people and you're going to have people, it'd probably be a good idea to learn how to sell those people effectively, to learn how to communicate effectively, and explain to them not just the what you want them to do, but how you want them to do it and why you want them to do it. Like before you soloed, somebody was like, okay, you've got to airspeed, airspeed, airspeed. Okay, I need you to be at X amount of airspeed or whatever it is. Then you're going to do flaps. The reason why you're going to do flaps is that's going to make the airspace over the wing bigger, and you're going to get additional lift at a slower speed, right? And then the way they explain all that to you, it makes sense, right? And you're able to do things that a normal human being would crash and die. But yet somebody that's gone through a process and understands the process and learned the process and could do the process, it's very simple and it's very easy, right? Like if we just took the things that pilots learn and put those into our day-to-day life and stop trying to wing it on everything. Bad reference there for pilots. We would be much, much more successful. And those are the things that I learned very, very early on in my life is whatever you're facing, there's a way out. There's a way to, but you just have to have a process. What you can't do is just try and force your way through things.
Or just be busy all the time. I think that's something that I often see people dealing with is just busy, busy, busy. Right?
You know why most
you're doing? What's the reason behind any of it?
And for entrepreneurs, they have different reasons for doing that. But you know why most people that aren't entrepreneurs, that don't have their own business, don't have their own podcasts like you do that? Because why? Because their leader created a culture where we need to look really busy, right? The culture's not about results. Now, imagine how looking busy would work for, say, an American Airlines captain, right? Sitting in the left seat. I don't know, just a bunch of crap, right? Hit a bunch of levers, flip a bunch of buttons, crash, burn, right? It's not about just looking busy. It's about having a precise process. And nobody wants to call BS and go, why are we doing it this way? Right? How can we do this more skillfully? How can we do this better? Right? And there's just so much fat in businesses. There's so much fat in leadership. There's so much fat in corporate culture that I don't know why we have this meeting every day, but we just have this meeting. Like every leader should be asking before every meeting, is this meeting completely necessary? Could this 30 minutes be 5 minutes? Could this be an email? Could this be a text? Right? Like, and this is where I think, especially with AI, a lot of people are they're going to have to figure this out or they're going to get replaced. Because if we're just having meetings to talk about stuff, I can get ChatGPT to do that for me. Right? I could turn in a TPS report all day long and still not accomplish anything.
Man, I appreciate taking everybody through all of that, and especially on the aviation side. And the one thing that stood out to me as you were speaking was, you know, we're behind closed doors and not a lot of people understand what we do. And like, oftentimes we get comments like, you guys must be stressed. You guys must be, you know, really busy. You guys must have a lot to, like, it's crazy. And I'm like, no, it's quite the opposite. I'm actually, the more boring the flight, the better.
Yeah.
Right? Like
you probably have like 1 minute of pure terror followed up by 3 hours of pure boredom, followed up by 1 minute of pure terror, something around those lines.
I would phrase it like 1 minute of heightened awareness.
not See, I'm not a pilot. For me, it would be pure terror.
Yeah, no, it's definitely heightened awareness, and that's kind of it. Like when I was training and when I was in the training sector in aviation, a lot of times it was not so much about the technical skills, because you either got those or you don't. You're either going to crash the airplane or you're not. The technical skills can be taught, and I think this goes, you know, for the most part, it goes with any industry. You know, obviously you can be better at certain things than other people, but technical skills can typically be taught. Versus when I was teaching and even in my coaching, you know, people want to focus on a lot of times the technical side, but they're skipping over the most important piece of it, which is the mental side. And, you know, and just to relate it to aviation there real quickly to finish up my point was, in aviation, you have to know when to pay attention, or not even just when to pay attention, but when to take it serious, or when to have the heightened awareness, or when to say the right thing at the right time. And I think that in life, and you know, maybe I'll ask it instead of speaking about it myself, but in your opinion, how important is the mentality or the mindset behind, selling something? And real quickly, you did mention adding value to people. Not you didn't you're not talking about sales in the old school mentality of you have a you find a, I don't know, something you want to sell to people, a coffee cup, and then you go around and you say, okay, well, who needs a coffee cup? And then you sell it to them. But
Right.
how important is mindset, and how important is it when it comes to adding value to people?
Yeah. Mindset, both in, my expertise, my field of expertise is in sales, but also being an entrepreneur, because I've started several companies, and both in sales and if you're an entrepreneur starting a company, mindset is everything. It's everything, Kyle. Like a pilot, when you take that exam to go from VFR, meaning you can land the, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you've forgotten more than I'll ever know. VFR, I can land the plane if I can see the runway. IFR, right? I can land the plane just looking at my instruments, correct?
Close.
Close.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can fly.
Close.
IFR is like, I can fly in clouds and I don't have to look at my instruments. And
is there something in the training there where you got to wear a plastic shield over your face, right?
Yeah.
So you can't see things.
Yes.
That's the same thing with businesses. It's like, I bet you a lot of people give up on getting that rating because there's probably some panic that insinuates there. Are we upside down? Am I going down? Am I going, oh my God, these gauges have to be screwed up. I don't trust this gauges. And that's what being an entrepreneur is all about, is you have to have the fortitude to say, okay, first of all, you have to have the intelligence to go, before I get started with this business, what is my process? And that's the number one mistake that every leader makes and every entrepreneur makes, is I've got a great idea. Everybody will want it, right? I'm going to be the best vice president of this company in the world because I've got all this experience. No, right? You got to look at, okay, well, what is going to be my process from day one? If I'm going to coach people, how am I going to coach them? And then you have to have the fortitude, just like when you're wearing that thing and you can't see what's going on, to follow through with that, because that's all sales ever is, right? We're flying by our instruments all the time, because I don't know what, if I'm trying to get funding for my company and I meet with a venture capital company and I'm asking them for $11 million, right? I don't know what they're saying in the room after I've left. I have to trust my instruments and go, okay, I covered all my bases. I went through the reasons why I believe we should receive this funding. I asked them, I said a crystal clear next step. I'm going to follow up with Kyle on Tuesday at 3:30 in the afternoon, not a minute before, not a minute after, and I'm going to trust my process. And now, between now and Tuesday, I'm going to call 3 other VC firms and see if they're interested, just in case for some reason I don't, based on everything that I'm seeing and everything that my instruments are telling me, this deal is going to go through. But I'm going to actually have some backup plans as well. Unfortunately, what everybody else in this world does that hasn't been trained, that doesn't follow a process, man, that was a great meeting with Kyle. I'm going to text him and let him know how great it was. And then I'm going to call him, and then I'm just going to beat this thing to death. And they end up just like a pilot that gets themselves into trouble. They get their career into trouble. They get their sales into trouble. They get their business into trouble because they never, one, took the time to go, how much work am I going to need to do to make this run, job, sales, business, whatever it is? What's my process for doing it? And then 3, they never trust the dang process, right? They just get all emotional on things where maybe there was an emotion. And like you had alluded to, some of the things that require them to take action, they miss those completely. Because when you're blinded by your emotions, you miss the important stuff and you spend time on the unimportant stuff. Murphy's Law.
And well said, man. I appreciate you taking us through that as well. I think that if we go one step further, then the process is definitely obviously super important. But how do you figure out the process ahead of time if you've never been involved in that area of expertise?
Yeah, so there's really 2 ways three. I'm not the best one on the third one, because the third one involves reading and books. I'm great at that now. Just like my friend in the Porsche said, don't say bad things about yourself. I figured out how to make it work. Plus had some eye therapy back when I was a 12, 15-year-old. I can read just fine, people. But the 3 ways are this.
You're going to have to read to us anyways nowadays.
For sure. So your 3 avenues are this. Avenue 1, in no specific order. Avenue 1, which I just alluded to, you can go find some books and read some books. Okay. There's a lot of books out there. Some of them are okay. Some of them are misinformation. Some of them are complete garbage. All right. It is what it is, right? Don't just read one book and go, this must be true. Right. Avenue number 2, you can seek out actual training. Imagine that. I can train on this kind of thing, right? Like, can you imagine if pilots and Navy SEALs and everybody just was like, I'm not going to train. I'm just going to read a book and then I'm going to try it. That doesn't work very well either. And then avenue number 3 is you can seek out a mentor, right? Like, and that's where I was successful is I read as many books as I could struggle through as a kid. I read just about every book I could on sales and business. But then what was more important for me is I found mentors that I could hang around, right? And that's like with our coaching, what we do a weekly live every week. So not only is there on-demand training where Kyle can train on something, but then Kyle can bring a question to me or the group and say, hey, guys, I've got this really great idea. I'm trying to introduce it to a venture capital company. How do I get their attention on the phone, right? And we'll talk through that. But the important thing is before you go and do something, do one of those 3 things, or preferably all of them. Read books, find training, consume content, but then also find other people, other mentors that you can ask them a question, right? Like, hey, when we're coming into land, I noticed that blah, blah, blah happens. Why is it that we turn on the APU or whatever? The other person will be happy to tell you. All of these secrets are out there. It's just nobody, it's so weird, especially in business and leadership. Everybody is so afraid and they waste so much money on conferences and all this crap. And nobody will call somebody else and go, hey, Chuck, it's Susan over here at XYZ. I'm the VP of sales over here. So, hey, how are you guys dealing with folks not wanting to come back after COVID? Right? Like nobody's going to be like, Susan, I hope you guys go out of business. They're going to be like, oh my God, we were just talking about that same problem. Here's what I'm doing. What are you doing? And then you guys can collaborate and do like it. We think the world is way worse than it is. Yeah. The more successful somebody is, the more likely they are to they're just waiting for you to ask them the question. Right. And they will happily give you hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars of free consulting, free help. They'll probably even follow up with you, Susan, in a week to go, hey, it's Chuck over here at XYZ. I wanted to know how that went with the meeting idea. That people want to help at least that's the way I see it. I think most people are genuinely good people. And if asked the question properly, would be more than happy to help you. Shout out to any kids watching this podcast, right? If you see somebody that is at a place where you want to be, whether they're a pilot or a CEO or a politician or whatever it is, freaking go up to them and ask them, yo, how do you do that, right? Like if you were 10 years old and you were interested in aviation, what would you do, Kyle? And Kyle would be like, dude, okay, here's the 3 things that were really great for me. By the way, here's the 5 major mistakes that I made. Don't do these things, right? You don't need to do these things. There's going to be an airport. They're going to want you to do this $300 learn to do. You don't need to do that, right? Just go to the FBO and whatever your advice would be. You would give that kid plenty of advice, right? That would probably set them way apart. And that works within companies as well, too. Everybody is so afraid to knock on that CEO's door and say, hey, I've got an idea that I'd love to get your opinion on, right? That's what by the way, that's what a CEO wants to hear. They don't want to hear, I'm getting married this year and I'd really appreciate it if you could bump my pay up $30,000. Bring them a new idea. You want to make more money in any company? Bring them a new idea. Bring your leader a new idea. Hey, I got an idea I want to get your opinion on. Yeah, what is it? Hey, so, we haven't really done anything with that Dallas market, and I've got a product that I think would be perfect in there. It's one of our older products that we could relabel. Does it make sense for us to give that a try? Man, that's a fantastic idea. Yeah, let's do it. I'd love to spearhead that. I am kind of caught up in my current role. Are you opposed to maybe kind of repositioning what I'm doing right now and pick up a little additional salary to be able to take on those risks? Absolutely. How much more were you thinking? 30 grand. Perfect. Yeah, let's do that. Go talk to Becky and HR. We'll make it happen for you. Yeah. And there's people listening to this podcast that are going, that guy's full of it. He doesn't live in my world. I lived in way worse than your world. way worse than your world. It's exactly how it goes down. You just don't have the courage to go ask somebody.
Yeah.
You just
Fear
don't.
paralyzes people, man.
Fear paralyzes people. And this thing of like, success is for other people and it's not for me, just like the guy in the Porsche said, that's crap. It's crap. It's complete crap, right? Like, they don't make $400,000 automobiles for people with 6 arms or 2 heads or 7 brains. The people buying those cars are the exact same as you out there listening to this podcast. They're just doing things not even vastly different than what you're doing, just following a process that certain things are different, and they're doing the right things in the right time with the right ways. They're seeking out the right people. They're blocking out the wrong people. Simple as that, man. Sometimes you got to take that door and freaking lock it because there's chaos going on in the back, right? And you got a job to do. People need to do that in their personal lives as well. They need to do that in their work lives as well, right? Stop getting involved in every little argument in your company.
If we go back to talking to that CEO, coming up with that idea, can you explain the other side of the coin and why there's still value there? If you came to the CEO and he says, and you pitch him this idea and he says, no, that's not a good idea. Like, is there still value in that?
Absolutely. Check this out. You say no. Hey, Kyle, you got a minute? I got an idea I'd love to get your opinion on.
Sure.
Yeah. So I had an idea regarding the San Antonio market. We're currently not really doing anything there. And I noticed we could open up a second location. I've got a product there. Does it make sense for me to put together some sort of proposal to do that?
No.
Got it. What's a good next step then?
Bring me some more research.
Perfect. Yeah. So I'll put together some research on it and have it over. What is today? Monday. How about I'll get something over to you by email, call it by 4:30 p.m. on Thursday. Fair enough?
Sure. Perfect.
Even a difficult person, right? Like,
it's hard not
to. It's hard.
Right?
Correct. And I'm not saying nothing in there was to manipulate Kyle.
Yeah.
It's just, first you have to realize the rules of the matrix before you can break the rules of the matrix, right? And here's the rules of the matrix. As shout out to my mom from Boston. Life isn't fair. She used to smoke the long cigarettes. Life isn't fair, right? Life is not fair. And your CEO, your boss, your wife, your kids, everybody is pre-wired. Are they pre-wired to say yes, or are they pre-wired to say no?
They're pre-wired to say yes.
I think they're pre-wired to say no.
Oh, okay.
I would, because most people are like, hey, do you want to do this? No. Do you have time for this? No. Right? So just hang in there and then ask them, what's a good next step? Right? I don't know. And then point, but here's a great one. Point the question for all the kids out there, for all the people that want to expand your career too. Ask somebody if it makes sense, because you're asking them a timing question, not an all or nothing request. If they say no to that, ask them what a good next step is. Don't say what's the best next step. There's too much pressure in that. Just, hey, what's a good next step then? They'll tell you. If they don't, point the question back at yourself, because people love to boss other people around. What's a good next step on my end? Or what's a good next step for me? Do some research. Perfect. I'll have that to you 4:30 on Friday. Fair enough. Right? Notice how you can make any statement in this world if you put fair enough at the end of it, because you're giving that person an out. Right? And this is something that leaders need to realize. Like, hey, I'm going to need you. Here's the expectation, Kyle. You haven't been here on time. We got to have you here on time. The business does not run if you're not here. So I'm going to need you to make sure that you're here by 9 o'clock. And I'm going to be checking to make sure you're here by 9 o'clock every day. So I'm going to need you. We're going to need to have at least 3 weeks go by where you're showing up on time at 9 o'clock. And I'm going to check on you every day. Fair enough? You're giving that person an opportunity to go, well, no, that doesn't work for me. And you have to be confident enough as a leader when they say that doesn't work for me, for you to say what? Got it. What's a good next step then? Well, what do you mean? I just communicated to you that the operation does not run if you are not here in your desk at 9 o'clock. I've given you an opportunity to where we're going to monitor you. I hate to do it. I know you hate to do it, but I also have priorities with the business, right? But what's your thoughts?
Right.
What's a good next step for me? Right? And if that person's like, well, I freaking quit. that probably was never a situation you were going to fix anyways. But what you can't do is what's so popular in 2023 is be passive aggressive and wishy-washy. That doesn't work for pilots. It doesn't work for firefighters. It doesn't work for race car drivers, and it doesn't work in business, right? Hey, I really appreciate it if you get here on time, right? And then we could talk about all the stuff on the other side of why that person should be self-motivated and should be getting there on time. But as a leader, you have to also understand that leaders cannot really motivate somebody. They can inspire somebody, right? They can get them fired up. But at the end of the day, if Kyle doesn't give a crap about Kyle's life, and Kyle is not going to be professional no matter what, and Kyle's not bought in. Now, a leader can help somebody find what's going to buy them in, can find that moment, right? A leader can do that all day. Figure out, hey, Kyle, so, man, if you could have anything in the next 5 years, like close your eyes, what does your perfect day look like? Man, I'd love to have a freaking, I don't know, Audi S4, and I'd love to own my own house. Cool. I like that, man. Write that down. Audi S4. When you say own your own house, where do you want to live? Well, I'd like to live in the neighborhood over here by the office. Awesome, man. How can I help you get there? Right? And here's what I want you to do every day, Kyle. I want you to take a sheet and I want you to write down those goals. I drive an Audi S4, blah, 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 blah. Like no leader ever has the guts to do that. But that's the kind of stuff that change people's lives if you're a leader. But there are some people that are like, I don't know, I'm cool. Just want to play Call of Duty. And then that person, hey, if they're not doing their job, they may need to get off the bus at the company. But you have to get people to embrace a process. You have to have the courage, if they're not going to do the thing you want them to do, to give them an opportunity to actually tell you that. Because then what ends up happening is if you're wishy-washy and if you're a leader that's not selling your people, selling your family, you don't have everybody on board, you're going to find out about that when it's way too late, right? Everybody quits their job. And if you're an entrepreneur out there, this is your biggest paranoia, right? Am I going to hire somebody and give them $75,000 a year or $150,000 a year, and it's a bad investment? Well, if you're not a skillful leader, you're guaranteed to have that, because they're going to quit their job 4 months before they come to your office and tell you they've quit. So now 4 months has gone by where you've paid this person and they haven't been doing anything. We have to just take the emotions out of things sometimes, both in flying an airplane, leading people, our relationships with our spouse, and just trust a process, give that person an opportunity to communicate with us, find some common ground, and set a next step and move forward. Unfortunately, we just have circular conversations that go nowhere.
So you're answering a lot of the questions that I was, as I was thinking, even just out of the blue, you kept going. So I really appreciate that. There's two things that, and tell me if you agree or expand on top of them, but vulnerability and then getting people to believe, which you've talked about quite a bit, getting people bought in to whatever your goal and vision is. How does vulnerability play into that?
Yeah. When you say vulnerability, can you give me a specific example of what you mean there? Because I think I know what you mean, but I want to make sure that I'm on track.
Well, I'm trying to, I guess, in my thought around vulnerability is you can't just think that you're a nice person and expect somebody to come to you and give you open feedback, or to give you, or to tell you their problems, or to open up to you. And so it's not just enough for me to be a good human being or a nice human being or whatever, because we have this fear that people aren't going to value us if we tell, or if we open up to them, or they're going to judge us. So how do you create that space of vulnerability as a leader, or how important is it?
I really like your answer, Kyle, because vulnerability is one of those misused words right now, and it's very in fashion, and people have it for the wrong way. They think, oh, if I'm going to be a leader, and you'll go on any social media and look up leadership, you're going to find a reel or something that's like, hey, if you want to be a successful leader, you need to be vulnerable. And they misinterpret that and go, guys, I'm really insecure about this, and I'm concerned about my weight, and my marriage isn't going well, or whatever it is. That's not the kind of vulnerability that's going to help you in life. Sorry, life is hard. Everybody has challenges. You being a victim is not the same as you. My definition of where vulnerability is important as a leader, is important as an entrepreneur, is important as a salesperson, is you need to be comfortable with the fact that you are not going to get everything you want in life. Sometimes things aren't going to work out. But my definition as a leader and as a sales coach in vulnerability is you need to be calm and confident enough to realize when a situation is not going well, and you need to be crystal clear in communicating to them, hey, I do not want this to happen, right? This is not the outcome. I see that we're heading down this road. Based on everything that you're telling me, my interpretation of the situation is this. And we're heading down a road that I cannot have this have. I can't go down this road. But I want to let you know ahead of time that I understand that this is where this is headed. I want to correct this, but you need to also know this. Although I don't want that to happen, if it does, the consequences are X, Y, and Z. And that's the vulnerability that I think most people don't have in their personal lives. It's like, you'll have friends that, man, they just keep wanting me to go out and get drunk with them, or this or that, and they're trying to, and we don't have the guts or the vulnerability to say, hey, I still want to be your friend, but I cannot be drinking with you until 2:00 in the morning on a Tuesday anymore. And if you're not okay with that, that's okay too. But here's where my line is, right? We have to be vulnerable enough to say, I'm not going to win everything, but I'm also not going to force it as well, because we just end up burning the whole thing down because we're too afraid to say to somebody, listen, I don't want this to happen, but I will accept this happening, right? And I'm accountable for it. So I want to let you know that I'm doing everything I can to save this, but there's going to come a time where you're no longer going to be able to work at this company, or there's going to come a time where you're not going to have a car to drive if you're a kid or whatever it is, right? But unfortunately, we think vulnerability is saying things like, oh, I was upset too. And let me tell you about my problems. And we end up leadership is not everybody talking about our problems. Mm-hmm. Leadership should be, okay, here's what our situation is. Let's talk about solutions, right? I'm here to talk about solutions.
And accepting our problems, but focusing their time on the solutions.
That's a great way of putting it. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I think that vulnerability, you're right. Like, a lot of people misconstrue what that definition is, and they think that it's talking about their problems so that other people can help them. But it's you have to accept where you are. You have to accept your problems. You have to accept your obstacles, so that when you do talk to people about it, it doesn't come off like you're the victim or you're complaining, because nobody can help somebody who's the victim of their problems. Yeah, you can't totally help those people, right?
Right. Yeah. And look at like leaders on all phases, like, and this is especially prevalent in today's environment. You'll have people that can rattle off what the culture is of the company or the organization or their boss or the expectation. But if you ask them what the direction is, they can't tell you, right? And all that culture stuff is great and fine, and I have no problem with it. But a good leader should also be able to say, hey, we are going here. How we're getting there is this way. I plan on being at checkpoint 1 by this amount of time, checkpoint 2 by this amount of time, and checkpoint 3 by this amount of time, right? We've lost our way. We've lost our ability to navigate, and we're spending way too much time on like, how does everybody feel about this, and how, and let me be vulnerable in the wrong ways. And these organizations and these individuals, it makes me really sad, because I'll have people call me for my sales training, and they'll be like, well, I gave up and I got fired. And it's like, man, you could have turned this whole thing around if you had just asked for help, right? Mm-hmm. Like, just, if not asking me, ask a book, ask your boss. But there's a huge difference between going into the boss and being vulnerable, right? And saying, hey, I realize that we need to be at this checkpoint by this time, and I'm not in the top of the group. I'm in the bottom half. What can I do to get myself in the top half? If you were me and you were in the bottom half, what would you do? That's a constructive conversation. Mm-hmm. But walking into the boss's office and going, this isn't fair, and this us getting acquired by this other company, and that's not fair that I'm going to lose my job or my job is going to change. That doesn't do anybody any good, right? Hey, boss, I understand that we're getting acquired. I understand that my job is being consolidated. I want to be part of the team. What can I do? If you were me, what would you do? Yeah. Right? And that leader is going to be vulnerable enough to go, hey, I get it. Let me walk you through your options. And if you don't have any options, they're going to be straight up. Hopefully they'll be straight up with you and say, let me help you find a job somewhere else, right? Or whatever it is. But we have to work the problem in front of us with a process and not an emotion. The same way as a pilot, right? You guys have to be process, and not emotion. Because if you lose your mental edge, the whole thing's going to fall apart, and you're going to start seeing things that are not there, right? And that's not good for anybody.
And everything that you're speaking about here, again, just for everybody listening, just to hammer home the point, this is all mindset. This is all everybody's capable of making this shift. And when you were mentioning earlier, like, what's the default answer, yes or no? I immediately went to the I talk a lot about the brain's default of being like negative based upon a lot of the societal and Instagram and social media and like all of these influences, because everybody's trying to show their shell of what's perfect, what's going right in their life. Yep. Vulnerability isn't necessarily showing all the things that are going wrong in your life, right? But vulnerability is, like you're saying, again, it's asking for help, not complaining. It's recognizing, accepting the problem, and then, sharing maybe what the problem is, but in a context that you're asking, well, what do you guys think I can do? And those words are so powerful. Like, what can I do? Because that shows that you're open to learning, you're open to growth. And if there's one thing, an entrepreneur or somebody that owns a business, or even for my friends in my life, that I would respect more than anything, is not whether they screw up or not, or not whether they make mistakes or not, but whether they say, what can I do? Right? Because it shows complete ownership. Right?
For sure. And then the leader needs to be prepared when somebody says, what can I do? That they not only explain the what, but they explain the how and the why. Mm-hmm. So for example, right? Hey, the phones aren't getting answered here in the office. I'm going to need you. Well, it's real busy here. What can I do? Here's what I need you to do. If you're working with a current client, just say, hey, we've been gangbusters here. Everybody's trying to work with us. Do you mind if I grab this call? Like, have you ever been offended when you're eating at a restaurant that the person that's bringing your food and taking your order is also working other tables? Well, no, it's no different here, right? So just let the person know out of respect, hey, is it okay if I grab this call? Every customer you're working with is going to say yes. Then what I want you to do is make sure you pick up the other call within 3 rings. Say, it's a great day at Easton University. What can I get you information on? Because every caller wants information. Don't say, how can I help you? Don't say your name, because they're going to forget it. What can I get you information on? Okay. But if you don't answer that phone and start that call, you personally, Kyle, are going to have to do 9 times more work.
Yeah.
Why is it 9 times more work? Because that call is going to go to voicemail, and then you're going to have to listen to that voicemail, which is the same amount of time it would have taken to just handle it. Then you're going to call that person back, and you're going to expect that person to live in a different universe than you live in and answer their phone, which you didn't answer the phone when they called you, and you're going to get their voicemail. And then you're going to leave an unskillful voicemail message, because I haven't taught you how to leave one of those yet. And then they're going to call you back, and what's going to happen? We're going to be busy here in the office, and they're going to leave a voicemail, and it's a death spiral. Like, if leaders just, and I'm using the phone as a problem because that's one of the things that I coach people on, but that's the same with anything else. Don't just say, hey, you need to be on time, or you need to answer the phone, or you need to turn in your TPS report. How do you do that? Why do we do that? What is the benefit to you personally of you doing it? And that benefit maybe is something as mundane as, I just want to let you know, as your regional manager, these are the types of things that leadership is looking at, right? And you told me you want to drive an Audi S4 and live in a condo over here in Palm Beach, right? I want to help you get there. A part of that is you turning in this report on time. I know it seems silly, but you'd be amazed. And then you have somebody that's like, man, I get it. He's got my back on this, right? He's nobody's really doing anything just to be a jerk. And if they are, go find someplace else to work, right? Like, we can do so much better when we just explain, what do I want from you? Why do I want it? What's the benefit of you giving me this? And if somebody doesn't want to do it, ask them, well, hey, what's the next step? I've defined what I need. I'm open to ideas. You tell me. And then following through that way. Life is a lot simpler than we make it.
Yeah, and I think that goes across the board. It doesn't matter who you are and where you are. It doesn't have this doesn't apply just to business, doesn't apply it also applies to relationships with yourself. Like, I think that the other perspective when you're speaking about the phone analogy is, I've been a customer where, I came up to the front desk, the phone's ringing, and they're not answering it. They're servicing me. And I think to myself, and this is where like a lot of these issues, with the fear of being let down, or the fear of not being valued, or the fear of being told no, a lot of these issues come from a shift in perspective, or the
Yes,
default perspective. And here's a different perspective. This is a perspective I always have, is when that phone's ringing, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, if I was a customer right now and I was phoning in, and it was just phoning and it was going to voicemail, I probably wouldn't come. Like, I wouldn't want to be here. So
for
even if
sure.
I'm the person standing at the front desk, immediately I'm thinking, well, they're not very customer oriented, right? If
Yeah.
they're
And how are they going to treat you when you're not there and you call? I
exactly,
do the same thing. I do
yeah,
the same thing.
people, it's so funny how often in the coaching world, how often I ask people what they're avoiding, and then I'd say, okay, let's go do that. But I don't just say let's go do that. We talk through it, and that's typically what happens on, a lot of my one-on-one calls. And it's like, okay, let's talk through it, and they'll tell me a perspective, they'll tell me a belief, and then I'll say, is there any other perspectives? Is there any other beliefs that you could think about right now? And they completely shift their entire belief around it, thinking that that thing that they're avoiding is actually the exact thing that they need to do. And there's all these positive rewards and positive outcomes, and that's typically what happens. So,
Yeah.
it's that shift in belief that I think is so important. And kind of talking one more thing, one question I really wanted to ask you, because you've talked a lot about, sales, working in a high pressure, fast paced, ever rapidly evolving industry. How do you help people to, like, how do you help people to manage their stress, their burnout, like not get
hmm
too overworked? How do you help people manage their time, their work life balance? Like, I think that's something that a lot of people are always asking themselves and trying to figure out.
Yeah, and I might not have the best way, but the students that embrace this, and they don't have, there's a ton of stuff at Easton University, and it's up to the student or whether or not they want to. And I'll just show it quick here, not to, but you see that there, perfect evidence. I still fill out. I make these sheets every day, and every morning before I start my day, I write down my life goals as if I've already achieved them. So I make blank. There's an amount of money that I'm trying to get to per year. My YouTubes make blank per month. I even have my personal, goes with your work-life balance, right? I have a weight that I want to maintain there. I used to write in there, I'm a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. For 14 years, I wrote that down every morning. Now I'm a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I used to write down, there was this ridiculous Bentley Mulsanne $400,000 car. I'm sorry, I wanted that, right? Every day I wrote that down. I drive a Bentley Mulsanne. Now it's in the garage next to the Porsche, next to the G-Wagon. It's like a formula. There's a watch on this one. I already have a yellow gold version of it, but damn it, I want that. But the point is this, how I manage my burnout is every morning I write down all of my goals that I'm working on. Those change very rarely. One comes off if I hit it, and things come off. Sometimes your life changes and your compass changes and you're not into something anymore. Then
Mm-hmm.
I'll take that off too. But I typically do not quit on my goals, and I set monster goals. But then every day, I have all of these little checks. I know there's things that I need to do every morning. I'm going to eat breakfast and drink Athletic Greens. Shout out to them. They don't pay me, right? Then I'm going to do a TikTok and IG. That's how you found me, Kyle, right? A LinkedIn and a YouTube short. I have things that I'm going to do every day, down to squats and bench presses and phone calls. And I've got my life managed into, and what's really weird is people are like, man, I'm really busy. And it's like, okay, when you say really busy, Every single person typically in a given day has less than 5 things that they got to get done that day. There may be 35 other things, but those 35 other things are things that they should be doing every single day. But nobody takes the, and this is something I picked up on as a kid, right? Because I had access to paper. I didn't have a lot of other stuff. So I just started writing my goals down. And it's amazing, this whole idea. And I think that's where some people, no disrespect if they're into this, and that's cool. It's whatever works for the individual. But for me, where I got off track was this idea of like a work-life balance. Where I started to excel is when I lumped everything into the same bucket and started realizing this is an ecosystem. I just live a life. And my job is part of my life, because I had some real crappy jobs as a kid. I mean, I washed dishes, right? It was the worst thing ever, funkiest job you could ever have. But I realized real quick, I don't want this to be part of my daily activities. So I did the things that I needed to do to get out of that job. I started to think about it. Ask the guy at the manager if I could be a busboy, right? It took 3 times asking them, because by the way, if you're a dishwasher, you're going to have to ask more than 3 times, because nobody wants to do that job. You realize you're a cog in a machine that they don't want to have to replace. So then when I became a busboy, I'm like, I still don't like working here. So I need to start talking to the customers at this restaurant. And if they, sorry, I'm materialistic. A lot of this stuff is like baited back to me being a broke kid. If they happen to have a Rolex watch on, right? Hey, what do you do? Where do you live? You ever need your Christmas lights put up or your leaves broke? My name's Matt. I have a bike, right? And then like, boom, like, but until you start going, hey, I don't like washing dishes. What's the way out of dishes? Become a busboy. Man, busboy is not that great either. But what do I have? What are my resources? What are the tools in front of me? I have access to the customer base. Maybe I should tuck my shirt in every day and iron my pants every day and be real nice and helpful, right? And when somebody forgets their food, run out to their car. Wow, that's an awesome BMW. What's your name? My name's Kyle. Kyle, what do you do? I'm an orthodontist. A lot of orthodontists out there are real rich. I had no interest in being an orthodontist. Okay, so great to meet you, Kyle. See you later. Bye. What's your name? My name's Bill Kitchen, right? That was one of my mentors. What do you do? I sell television technology equipment. Cool. Can I come down? Absolutely. Right? Come down, check it out. Right? Like, life is easy, but it's not easy if you don't have a compass. Yeah. So lump it all into one bucket. Create your own little list that you fill out every day. It takes 5 minutes, but you're going to find that will center you and that will focus you. And you'll start looking at it. Here's the things that I need to do every day. And then life will start coming together. But the cool thing about having a compass like that is on those worst days, you've refocused yourself on your goals and you realize I'm in this for the long haul. I'm not in this for today. So did that steel blow up in my face? Absolutely. Is this going to matter in 5 years? Absolutely not. I know that I have to make 80 phone calls today. I've looked at my list. I'm 65 deep. Let me get to these other 15 phone calls, right? And you're working your process. And that's where a lot of people don't understand this in their career, is they think their boss has control over them. Your boss has zero control over you. There's an expectation of performance, but you are totally free to be also working your own life goals within that job. And nobody has the guts to admit to their boss, hey, dude, I want to be where you're at one day. But if they did, their boss would probably help them get there a lot faster, right? Like I hear so much silly stuff of like, don't wear a fancy watch to a meeting or that is all complete garbage, right? You wear what you want to wear. You're working your plan. And people are, when you have that confidence and trust in yourself and you're following through on your process, good things will happen to you. And if they don't, guess what? Now you know there's a broken piece in that process. There's something that I need to change. Yeah. Maybe instead of sending out 300 emails in a day that are spam, I should make 30 phone calls. Let me try that. Right? It's just really weird how pilots and athletes figure this stuff out really early, that like it's all about just trusting the process. And worst case scenario, I'm just going to tell the tower, I'm going to pull back around. I'm going to do another approach. Yeah. Was that embarrassing? Hell yeah, that was embarrassing. But it works, right? But no, we're just all so gung-ho. We're crashing our relationships. We're crashing our businesses. We're crashing our ideas because we're not following a process and we're not keeping ourselves focused on what's the destination that I'm trying to get to.
Yeah. And the one, it's kind of funny. There's so many things that I relate back to aviation because it did teach me. And I've had clients that in certain industries, like healthcare was one of them, just certain industries where people like realize these certain rudimentary like soft skills. And in aviation, the culture there was a big, like it's really evolved because
Mm-hmm.
obviously we have 200 reporters in the back, and one airplane crash would be, you know destroy an airline. but
Yep.
but the culture was like, just your analogy there before, your example before is, you have to go around, just do another circle. Is it embarrassing? Well, we actually went like so far that it, like, we're really cultivating that environment that's not embarrassing. The opposite
Yeah.
is embarrassing. When you land, right, and you're unsure, when you land, or when something isn't right, like even if everything works out and you went to your even if you didn't tell anybody, you should be embarrassed because
Yeah.
you didn't take the safest course. You didn't do what you're trained to do. You didn't, right? Like, to pull up and go around, like people think that's crazy, that's an emergency or whatever. Like, no, like that is exactly what we're thinking up until the point that we land.
Mm-hmm.
And you should be embarrassed if you know that you should be doing something else and don't do it, right? Like, so I think just cultivating that culture as well, and a lot of the things that you're talking about. But I really appreciate you having you on the show today, and just
Yeah. Thank you so much.
kind of to finish it up here. I have two questions in mind. Number one, like what kind of, and they kind of go together. But number one, what sort of advice would you give to somebody? I don't necessarily want to just say sales, but somebody who is, learning to lead themselves better. And is
Mm-hmm.
there a specific book that, and I know books come and go and they are relevant at certain times, but is there a certain book or podcast or some sort of nugget of information that you would suggest people checking out?
Yeah. So to answer the first part of the question, the advice, if somebody wants to go somewhere, get somewhere, become something, here's what I would do based on my experience in life and my relative success. I would, if it's worth you wanting to get there, I would be able to articulate that and be writing that down, ideally on a regular basis, of what you want to do, where you want to go, what you want to have happen. The next thing and this is where everybody falls short. Most people set goals. They do it on New Year's Eve when they're intoxicated, and that doesn't do them any good. Set the dang goal, remind yourself of the goal. But more importantly, I want you to think about what are the steps that you need to do? What are the little things, the micro tasks that you need to do every day to get you there?
Mm-hmm.
And if anybody listening to this podcast, and I'm telling you, we're not attempting, well, most of us listening, unless Elon's listening to this podcast, we're not attempting space travel. Okay. I guarantee you, I don't know you, I haven't met you, but if we sat down and had coffee, I am not going to be shocked by any of your goals. Okay. It is all obtainable for you. Everything is on the table. You can do it. But you have to write the goal down and you have to go, okay, well, what are the steps? Here's the cool thing. You don't have to be right about the steps. You just have to say, these are the steps, and then you can improve and change the steps. But just wanting something isn't enough.
Yeah.
Now, on the book side of things, I can't really, there's not a specific book because I grabbed stuff from all of these mentors that I had as a kid. I would listen to this podcast. I would save this. I put it on my Spotify or whatever you listen to. I would listen to this podcast. One, because it's a cool podcast. Two, there's something that nobody ever talks about that I'm passionate about, why I agreed to be on here. Just the aviation references alone, whether you're into aviation or not, anybody that wants to be successful should just kind of gently hang around or pay attention to aviation, because it's the safest way for you to get the fastest way from point A to point B, whether it's transportation or your life. Listen to how a pilot communicates with the tower. Listen to how procedures are followed. Listen to how checks are made. Like, all of this stuff it really has nothing to do with aviation. It's just the right way to be safe, but also get somewhere.
Yeah.
Because if you're just safe, you're going to get nowhere. Right? If we're just safe, I am never going to take the plane off unless it's 72 degrees, specific humidity and wind head, right? Like, the aviation is a great reference, right? So that's why I like this podcast. My stuff, you can find me at Easton University on most every channel. Hang out with me. I throw out plenty of free stuff. If you don't like hanging out with me, find somebody or a book or something. I wish I had one I could recommend. I'll be honest, I try and read them all, and then I pull out the one or two pieces of stuff. There's a lot of garbage out there, but do something. If you don't resonate with me, if this podcast doesn't resonate with you, find something and stick to it. But if you're not going to do any of that, write your damn goals down and go, well, what are the things I need to do every day? Everybody wants to lose weight. Everybody wants to get married to a supermodel. Right. But they're not going, okay, well, do I really want to get married to a supermodel? Yes, I totally do. This is really important to me. Okay, cool. Where do supermodels hang out? Fashion shows. I'm going to go to one fashion show a month. Right. And I'm going to sit in the audience. Like, life is not that hard. Hey, I want to drive a Porsche. Where do they have Porsches? At the Porsche dealership. I'm going to head down there the next time they have an event. I'm going to go talk to some of the people. Wow, that guy's got a Bentley Mulsanne, right? Hey, how did you get that? Like, we sit there and we say we want certain things, but we don't get laser focused on what we want. And more importantly, we don't go, okay, well, what are the steps that I need to take to get there? And if you just do those two things, write your goals down, follow a process every day, you'll be a lot less stressed, and you're going to make progress. Even if you're not doing the right things, it's still going to give you progress. Yeah. Bumping around to stuff gets you nowhere in aviation and life. Not a good idea to bump into stuff.
It's not.
No.
That's awesome. And the book reference, it's funny how often my guests they don't want to give one specific book. And I completely agree with you. I think it's about taking nuggets of information, whether it's from books, podcasts, mentors, coaches, people in your life. And I think that's the ultimate way to progress in life is get good at filtering out and filtering in. Like, ask yourself, is this useful? Is this not useful? Right.
And any podcast, there's $1 million in it, right? You just have to listen to it. Okay, well, what's the one little piece that I'm going to pull out this for me? Yeah. Right. And people think, oh, well, I read this book, I should be a millionaire by now. That's not how it works. Yeah. Right. Find one thing that you're like, man, I think I could incorporate that. You know, I just had an argument with my son about not doing his homework last night. Let me try that with him, you know, and just pull wherever you're getting it from, just pull out nuggets. But there's a cheat code in all of this. And that is just freaking ask.
Yeah.
You know, ask somebody for help.
Yeah.
Somebody called my office and was like, hey, I want to speak to Matt. I charge for private coaching, but my wife hates this because when she's in the office, she'll destroy me on this because she'll be like, you just spent 30 minutes on the phone with that person. I'm like, but it's some guy that's, you know, that you would do the same thing. You charge for private coaching. Yes, Kyle?
Yes.
If somebody called you and was like, I'm in a real jam here. Kyle, can you just give me some sort of direction? You are a good person and you would say, listen, I can do a private coaching session with you. It's going to cost you X. In the meantime, take a look at this, this, and this, right? Absolutely. Let me send you over a link to this podcast. You're going to help them, right? Like, but nobody asks. We just bounce into stuff, and that's doesn't work.
There's one final thought just on that, since it's at the top of my head, is a lot of people get scared to say no. I find, like, if they want to say, you know, they're people pleasing and they have a hard time saying no, think about the idea that you never actually have to say no. Just give them the next step or give them a piece of
100%.
Right. If hey, I want to buy a stapler from you and you don't have one, don't say no. Say, oh, well, hey, I know a great staple place, right? I know where you can buy one.
And we'll be here when you need paper.
Exactly. Right?
You know,
and that's not just a sales thing. That is for anything and everything. If your friends come to you and they want some advice on something, think about whether you're the person to give it to them, or think about somebody else that you know, or a podcast or a book, and refer them to them. Refer them to that, right?
I agree, Kyle, 1,000%. I'll add something to that. Just me personally, I think we say I'm sorry way too much as well. Like, if your friend comes to you and you've got an important, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it is at work the next day, it is okay for you to go, hey, I can't attend that. I'm working my plan. Dude, I'm on this quest. I want to be up early for this meeting, or I've got this test tomorrow. You do not have to say, I'm sorry with that.
Yes.
If that person is really your friend, they will still be your friend later. Yes. And even if let's say they're halfway your friend and they're like, man, Kyle's a jerk, just wait till you get your Bentley. And it's amazing how all of a sudden that same person that was talking smack about you behind your back will be like, dude, you're the best.
Yeah.
It's because I'm focused, right? But we got to stop saying sorry.
Yeah.
Right. You should save sorry for when you really mean it.
Yeah.
Right. Like say sorry when you back over somebody's, phone or foot or whatever. That's a good time to say sorry. But if you can't help somebody on something, don't say I'm sorry. Great question. Right. I don't have that. Let me help you figure out the answer. Just like you said, hey, can I get a stapler? We don't have those. But that's a great question. Let me get you the answers. 3 places right around here that do. By the way, my name's Matt. I'll be here if you guys need paper.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Like you don't. Oh, I'm sorry, we don't have that.
Those are the people that stand out. That's what it's all about.
For sure. Those are problem solvers.
I appreciate you coming on here, Matt, and sharing your nuggets of wisdom. And how else can people find out about you? And I'll throw it all in the show notes. But you've got
for sure. Yeah, eastonuniversity.com, and then on social at Easton, EASTON, university.com. Find me. I mean it. Call the offices, 800-628-1456. If my wife's not in the office, I'll talk to you at least 5 minutes. If she is, we got to make it quick. But yeah, I'm here to help. Whatever you guys need, Kyle knows where to find me. Hang out on Kyle's podcast a lot more. Be around good people like Kyle. You're going to do just fine. No matter where you're at in this life, I'm telling you right now, you're closer to your perfect life than you are far away from it. Just keep the faith, keep a process, listen to the right people, do the right things, and do it consistently. Everything's going to work out for you. I promise you.
All right, Matt, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
All right.
Perfect.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Captain's Mindset Podcast. We hope you found value in our discussion of leadership and personal development. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing and leaving us a review. Your feedback helps us improve the show and reach more listeners. Remember, everyone has the potential to be a leader in their own life. Keep working on developing a captain's mindset and leading with purpose and intention. Join us next time for more insights and tips on how to become the best version of yourself. And until then, keep navigating through the ups and downs of your life with a captain's mindset and always steer towards becoming the best version of yourself. Become the captain of your own life.